Detective Marcus Hale was a name everyone in the city knew. He wasn't just another officer. He was the kind of detective who solved cases others thought were impossible. With his sharp mind, quick thinking, and a knack for noticing even the smallest details, he had earned both respect and admiration. But beneath his confident exterior, there was always a sense that danger followed him like a shadow. And one fateful evening, that shadow finally caught up. It all started with a case involving a powerful crime syndicate. The group had been terrorizing the city for years, running illegal operations and silencing anyone who dared to oppose them. Hale had spent months gathering evidence, working late nights, and risking his life to bring them down. Finally, after a dramatic arrest, the leader of the syndicate was behind bars. The city celebrated, and Hale's colleagues hailed him as a hero. But little did anyone know, this victory would come at a cost. The night after the case closed, Hale left the station around midnight. His car engine roared to life as he drove toward the outskirts of town, heading home to get some much-needed rest. But something strange happened along the way. His car was later found abandoned on a deserted road, its doors wide open and headlights still shining into the darkness. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no broken glass, nothing out of place. Just an empty car sitting eerily under the pale glow of the moon. At first, people thought maybe Hale had decided to take a break. Some speculated he might have gone off-grid to escape the pressure of his job. After all, solving big cases like the one he'd just cracked could take a toll on anyone. But as hours turned into days, concern began to spread. Calls went unanswered, and visits to his apartment revealed no trace of him. His phone was switched off, and nobody had seen or heard from him since that night. The police department launched a full-scale search operation. Flyers were posted across the city, asking for any information about his whereabouts. Officers scoured every corner of town, checking old hideouts, abandoned buildings, and even places linked to the criminals Hale had put away. Yet, despite their best efforts, there was no breakthrough. Every lead seemed to hit a dead end. As the days stretched into weeks, whispers of foul play grew louder. Could someone from the crime syndicate have retaliated? Was this their way of sending a message? Or was it something else entirely? Something darker, more personal? The uncertainty gnawed at everyone involved. Friends and colleagues couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to Hale. What made things worse was the lack of evidence. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. No ransom demands, no cryptic messages, no clues left behind, just silence. And in that silence, fear began to creep in. Not just for Hale's safety, but for what his disappearance meant for the entire department. If someone could make a seasoned detective disappear without a trace, then no one was truly safe. For now, all they could do was wait and hope for answers. But deep down, everyone feared the worst. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of Detective Marcus Hale's disappearance only deepened. The city buzzed with theories, some wild, some sinister, but no solid answers emerged. Just when it seemed like the case had gone cold, an anonymous tip came in late one evening. A shaky voice on the other end of the line claimed that something unusual was happening at a small cemetery on the outskirts of town. The caller refused to give their name but insisted that a grave there didn't belong to anyone officially recorded. The lead was vague, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Captain Laura Simmons, Hale's superior and close friend, decided they couldn't afford to ignore even the smallest possibility. She assembled a team of trusted officers and headed to the cemetery under the cover of night. The air was thick, with tension as they arrived. The graveyard was eerily quiet, save for the rustling leaves and distant hoot of an owl. It felt like the kind of place where secrets could easily stay buried, literally. They found the plot quickly enough. Unlike the others, this one had no proper headstone, just a simple wooden marker with the word unknown carved roughly into it. There were no flowers, no signs of recent visitors, nothing to suggest this grave belonged to someone who mattered, or even existed. The dirt covering the coffin looked fresh, hastily packed down without care. Someone had clearly wanted this burial to go unnoticed. Captain Simmons exchanged uneasy glances with her team. "This doesn't feel right," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Still, they knew what had to be done. Permission was granted to exhume the coffin, though everyone present felt a mix of dread and hope. Could this really be connected? To Hale? Or were they chasing another dead end? As workers began digging, the atmosphere grew heavier. Each shovel of dirt brought them closer to the truth, and possibly to heartbreak. Officers stood around the grave, some pacing nervously while others watched silently, their faces pale under the dim light of lanterns. No one spoke. The only sounds were the rhythmic thud of shovels hitting soil and the occasional creak of wood as the coffin became visible. Finally, after what felt like hours, the coffin was fully uncovered. It was plain, made of cheap wood, and showed no markings or identification. Whoever had buried it hadn't intended for it to be found. As two officers carefully pried open the lid, the group leaned in, holding their breath. What they saw next sent shockwaves through everyone present. Inside the coffin lay a man, pale and motionless but unmistakably alive. His chest rose and fell faintly, his breath shallow but steady. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone gasped, breaking the stunned silence. "It's him!" another officer exclaimed. "It's Detective Hale." The realization hit them like a tidal wave. How could this be possible? Why would someone bury him alive? And most importantly, who was behind this horrifying act? Questions raced through their minds as paramedics rushed forward to tend to Hale. He was weak, almost skeletal, and his eyes fluttered weakly as he tried to focus on the faces surrounding him. Though he couldn't speak yet, his presence alone was enough to reignite hope and fury among those who cared about him. As Hale was carefully lifted out of the coffin and placed onto a stretcher, Captain Simmons clenched her fists. Whoever had done this wasn't just targeting Hale, they were sending a message. But now, with Hale found alive, the game had changed. The department vowed to leave no stone unturned in finding out who was responsible and making them pay for what they'd done. The moment Detective Marcus Hale was pulled from the coffin, the scene at the cemetery erupted into a flurry of activity. Paramedics worked quickly, wrapping him in warm blankets and strapping an oxygen mask over his face. His body was frail, his skin ghostly pale, and his eyes darted around as if trying to make sense of where he was. Despite his weakened state, there was something undeniably alive about him, something that refused to give up. The officers who had spent weeks searching for answers now stood frozen, their hearts torn between relief and horror. Captain Laura Simmons knelt beside the stretcher, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Marcus, can you hear me? It's Laura. You're safe now." Hale blinked slowly, his gaze locking onto hers. He tried to speak but could only manage faint, raspy sounds. His lips moved like he was struggling to form words, but exhaustion overwhelmed him. Still, even in his fragile condition, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a spark that told everyone he was still the same determined man they knew. As Hale was loaded into the ambulance, the team sprang into action. Officers cordoned off the area, collecting evidence from the coffin and the surrounding soil. Someone had gone to great lengths to bury him without leaving traces, but the department wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. Every grain of dirt, every scratch on the coffin was meticulously examined. Meanwhile, Captain Simmons rode with Hale to the hospital, refusing to leave his side until she knew he was stable. At the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize him. They ran tests, hooked him up to IVs, and monitored his vitals closely. Initial assessments revealed severe dehydration and malnutrition, along with signs of prolonged sedation. Whoever had buried him hadn't intended for him to survive. They'd left him in the coffin, assuming he wouldn't wake up, or, if he did, that no one would find him in time. But somehow, against all odds, Hale had endured. By morning, news of his miraculous discovery spread like wildfire through the city. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, eager for updates, while colleagues and friends flooded the station with calls. For many, it was a mix of disbelief and elation. How could someone so skilled and resourceful have been reduced to this? And more importantly, Who would dare do such a thing? When Hale finally regained enough strength to communicate, he began piecing together fragments of his ordeal. Sitting upright in his hospital bed, his voice hoarse but steady, he recounted what little he remembered. "I don't know how long I was out," he said, pausing frequently to catch his breath. "They came for me. Masked men. Drugged me before I could fight back." His hands trembled as he described waking up in complete darkness, unable to move or call for help. "I thought I was dreaming at first. Then I realized I couldn't see anything because my eyes were covered." His account sent chills down everyone's spines. Whoever had taken him had planned everything carefully, ensuring he wouldn't be able to escape or identify them later. But amidst the haze of drugs and fear, one detail stuck with him. Whispers. Faint voices discussing orders from the boss. Though he couldn't recall names or faces, the mention of a leader confirmed what many already suspected. This wasn't random. This was personal. For Hale, survival wasn't just luck. It was resilience. Even in his darkest moments, trapped in the suffocating confines of the coffin, he had clung to the hope that someone would find him. That determination kept him alive when logic suggested otherwise. Now, as he lay recovering in the hospital, surrounded by those who cared about him, he vowed to uncover the truth, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed justice mattered. The discovery of Hale alive had shifted the narrative entirely. What started as a grim mystery now became a rallying cry. The department doubled down on its efforts, fueled by anger and resolve. Someone had tried to silence one of their own, but they had failed. And now, that someone was about to learn why crossing Detective Marcus Hale was the biggest mistake they could ever make. As Detective Marcus Hale slowly regained his strength in the hospital, the pieces of his ordeal began to come together. Though they were scattered and fragmented, like shards of glass reflecting only glimpses of the full picture. Every day, Captain Laura Simmons sat by his bedside, urging him to share anything he could remember, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. Hale, still weak but determined, sifted through the haze of drugs and fear that clouded his mind. Each detail he uncovered felt like pulling a thread from a tightly woven knot. "I remember voices," Hale said one morning, his voice clearer than it had been days before. "They weren't loud, but I caught bits and pieces." One of them mentioned the boss. His brow furrowed as he tried to recall more. "Whoever this person is, they're calling the shots. They wanted me gone, not just out of the way, but erased." Simmons nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes. The mention of a boss wasn't surprising, given Hale's recent takedown of Victor Kane, the notorious crime lord. Though Kane was behind bars, his influence still loomed large over the city. It wouldn't be far-fetched to think someone connected to him might have orchestrated Hale's abduction. But there was something else nagging at Hale, a fleeting memory he couldn't quite grasp. "There's more," he continued hesitantly. "I heard arguments. Someone didn't agree with what was happening. A man, I think, said something about not wanting to go too far. He sounded scared." Hale paused, closing his eyes as if trying to replay the moment in his mind. But then another voice cut him off. Cold, calculating. That voice said, "If we don't finish this, he'll come after us all." The room fell silent as the weight of those words sank in. Whoever had taken Hale wasn't acting alone. They were part of a larger operation, one fueled by fear and desperation. And whoever he was, the person these people feared, it was clear he held immense power. Could it be Kane? Or was there someone else pulling strings from the shadows? Hale also recounted being moved multiple times during his captivity. "I lost track of how long I was unconscious," he admitted. "When I woke up, I'd hear different sounds. Traffic sometimes. Other times nothing but silence. Once I swear I smelled salt water, like I was near the docks." These clues, though vague, gave investigators new leads to chase. Officers scoured areas close to the waterfront, searching for any signs of where Hale might have been held. But perhaps the most chilling revelation came when Hale described the coffin itself. "They drugged me again before putting me inside," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I woke up briefly while they were carrying it. I could feel the lid closing, the darkness pressing down on me. Then nothing, until I heard digging. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, the memory of suffocating terror still raw. They didn't expect me to survive. They thought I'd never wake up, or that no one would find me in time. Despite the horror of his experience, Hale remained resolute. Whoever did this made mistakes, he told Simmons firmly. They left traces. We can use that. His determination inspired everyone around him. Even in his weakened state, he refused to let anger consume him. Instead, he channeled it into focus, vowing to turn this nightmare into justice. Back at the station, the team worked tirelessly to connect the dots. Every clue Hale provided opened new avenues of investigation. Officers reviewed surveillance footage from the docks, interviewed locals, and re-examined evidence from past cases linked to Kane's syndicate. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs launched, a discreet probe within the department itself. If Hale's captors knew so much about his movements, it raised suspicions of a mole feeding information to the enemy. For now, the mystery remained unsolved, but hope burned brighter than ever. Hale's survival was proof that even in the darkest moments, resilience could prevail. With every fragment of memory he shared, the net tightened around those responsible. And as the pieces of the puzzle slowly came together, one thing became certain. Justice was coming, and it would strike hard. The investigation into Detective Marcus Hale's abduction took a dramatic turn when the team began connecting the dots between his fragmented memories and recent events within the department. As officers dug deeper, one name kept surfacing: Victor Kane. Though Kane was locked away in prison after Hale's efforts to dismantle his crime syndicate, his influence hadn't disappeared. In fact, whispers suggested that Kane had been orchestrating operations from behind bars, using loyal followers to carry out his dirty work. But what truly shocked everyone was the discovery of corruption much closer to home. Internal Affairs uncovered evidence pointing to a mole embedded deep within the police force, a trusted officer who had been feeding information directly to Kane's network. This betrayal explained how Hale's every move had been tracked so easily. It wasn't just bad luck or superior planning on the part of his captors. It was insider knowledge. The realization sent ripples of anger and distrust through the precinct. Colleagues eyed each other warily, unsure of who might be involved. The mole turned out to be Detective Ryan Greer, a mid-level officer with years of service under his belt. On the surface, Greer seemed like any other dedicated cop, hard-working, quiet, and reliable. But beneath that facade lay greed and desperation. Investigators discovered that Greer had fallen into debt due to gambling losses and had struck a deal with Kane's crew to settle his debts. In exchange for money, he provided sensitive details about ongoing cases, including Hale's movements during the days leading up to his disappearance. When confronted, Greer broke down quickly, confessing everything in a trembling voice. "I didn't know they'd take it this far," he stammered, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I was just passing along harmless info, not signing someone's death warrant." He revealed that Kane had ordered Hale's abduction as retaliation for dismantling his empire. Greer claimed he never intended for things to escalate, but admitted he feared for his life if he refused to cooperate. Greer's confession added fuel to the fire burning inside Hale. Despite still recovering from his ordeal, he insisted on being part of the investigation. Captain Laura Simmons initially resisted, fearing for his safety, but Hale wouldn't back down. "This isn't just about me anymore," he argued. "It's about sending a message that no matter how powerful or connected you are, justice will catch up to you." With Greer now under surveillance, kept alive as bait, the team devised a bold plan to lure Kane's remaining allies out into the open. Using fake documents leaked by Greer, they planted false evidence suggesting Hale had recovered incriminating files linking Kane to several unsolved murders. If the syndicate believed these files existed, they would stop at nothing to retrieve them and eliminate Hale once and for all. As preparations unfolded, tensions ran high. Officers worked around the clock, fortifying their strategy while keeping an eye on Greer's communications. Meanwhile, Hale spent hours studying old case files, searching for patterns that might reveal weaknesses in Kane's network. His sharp instincts told him there was more to uncover, something bigger than anyone realized. Despite the mounting pressure, Hale couldn't shake the feeling that this operation was personal. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of himself, a chance to prove that even after everything he'd endured, he was still the same relentless detective who refused to give up. And as the trap tightened, one thing became clear. Whoever walked into it next would regret crossing Detective Marcus Hale. Justice wasn't just coming, it was already here, waiting patiently to strike. Detective Marcus Hale's plan was risky, dangerous, even, but it was the only way to flush out the shadows that had haunted him for weeks. With the fake documents planted, the team moved swiftly to set their trap. The goal was simple: make Kane's crew believe Hale had evidence that could destroy them all, and then wait for them to take the bait. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about dismantling an entire network of corruption and fear. For Hale, this operation carried a weight far greater than his own survival. It was about proving that no one, not even the most powerful criminals, could operate above the law. The chosen location was an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city, a crumbling relic from decades past, surrounded by empty fields and rusted chain-link fences. It was remote enough to avoid civilian interference, but close enough for backup teams to stay hidden nearby. Officers worked tirelessly to wire the building with surveillance cameras and listening devices, ensuring every corner would be monitored. Detective Elena Cruz, Hale's trusted partner in the investigation, coordinated the logistics while Hale focused on playing the role of the target. On the night of the operation, Hale arrived at the warehouse alone, carrying a briefcase supposedly containing the incriminating files. His heart pounded as he stepped inside, the creak of his boots echoing through the cavernous space. Dust hung heavy in the air, catching the faint light of a single overhead bulb that swayed slightly, casting eerie shadows across the walls. He knew Kane's men were watching. They'd been tipped off by Greer earlier that day, and now it was only a matter of time before they made their move. Elena and the rest of the team waited outside, their nerves stretched taut like piano strings. Radios crackled softly as updates came in from officers stationed around the perimeter. Inside, Hale paced slowly, pretending to examine papers in the briefcase. Every sound, the scuttle of rats, the groan of metal beams, felt amplified in the silence. Then, finally, he heard it. The faint crunch of gravel underfoot outside. Someone was coming. Minutes later, the door creaked open, and 3 figures slipped inside, their faces obscured by masks. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, scanning the room before approaching Hale. One of them spoke first, his voice low and menacing. "Where are the files?" he demanded, stepping closer. Hale didn't flinch. "You want them?" "You'll have to earn my trust first," he replied coolly, buying time for the backup team to get into position. His calm demeanor masked the storm raging inside him. This was the moment he had prepared for, the chance to face those who had tried to break him. The standoff grew tense as the men debated whether to take the briefcase or eliminate Hale right there. But just as one of them reached for the case, a signal went off, a subtle click of a radio earpiece. That was the cue. Outside, officers stormed the building, shouting orders as flashlights cut through the darkness. The suspects scattered, firing shots wildly as chaos erupted. For Hale, the next few moments felt like a blur. Bullets whizzed past him as he dove, behind a stack of crates for cover. Adrenaline surged through his veins, sharpening his focus. Though he wasn't armed, his instincts kicked in, guiding him toward safety while keeping track of the suspect's movements. Somewhere in the melee, he locked eyes with one of the masked men, a fleeting glance that sent chills down his spine. As the officers closed in, 2 of the suspects were apprehended, but the third managed to slip away, disappearing into the night. Despite the partial success, Hale knew this wasn't over. Whoever had escaped would report back to whoever was truly pulling the strings. And until that person was caught, the threat remained alive. Back outside, Hale stood among his colleagues, breathing heavily, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. They had struck a blow against Kane's network, but the victory was bittersweet. The fight wasn't finished. Not yet. Still, as Hale looked around at the determined faces of his team, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Justice might take time, but it was inevitable, and he would see it through to the end. The chaos of the warehouse raid left everyone on edge, but Detective Marcus Hale's determination burned brighter than ever. 2 of Kane's men were now in custody, handcuffed and spilling their guts in separate interrogation rooms. They claimed they were just hired muscle, following orders from someone higher up. But when pressed about who gave those orders, their answers became evasive. "We don't ask questions," one muttered, his voice trembling. "All we know is that if we didn't do what we were told, we'd end up like you." Hale leaned forward, his sharp gaze piercing through the man's nervous facade. "Like me?" he asked calmly, though his tone carried an unmistakable edge. "You mean buried alive? Is that the kind of loyalty your boss expects?" The suspect shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet Hale's eyes. It was clear he knew more than he was letting on, but fear kept his lips sealed. Whoever was pulling the strings had instilled a deep sense of terror in these men, making them willing to risk everything rather than betray their leader. Meanwhile, the third suspect, the one who had escaped during the raid, led officers on a frantic chase through the city. Surveillance footage showed him fleeing toward an old industrial district, where abandoned factories loomed like skeletons against the night sky. Captain Laura Simmons coordinated the pursuit, deploying units to cut off possible escape routes. By dawn, they cornered him in a dimly lit parking lot, his car surrounded by police cruisers with flashing lights. When he stepped out with his hands raised, his face pale with defeat, Hale felt a flicker of satisfaction. But it was short-lived. Back at the station, the escaped suspect cracked under questioning faster than anyone expected. He revealed that Victor Kane himself had ordered Hale's abduction, despite being locked away in prison. Using smuggled cell phones and bribed guards, Kane had orchestrated the entire operation from behind bars. The mole, Detective Ryan Greer, had simply been a pawn in a much larger game, one designed to send a message. No one crosses Kane without consequences. But there was more. The suspect also admitted that Kane had recently made a deal with another powerful figure, a rival crime boss known only as the Broker. This mysterious individual had agreed to help Kane regain control of his crumbling empire in exchange for a share of the profits. Together, they planned to rebuild their networks and eliminate anyone standing in their way, including Hale. With this new information, the team devised a final confrontation. Intelligence suggested that Kane's top lieutenant, a ruthless enforcer named Victor Viper Morales, would be meeting with the Broker later that evening at a secluded dockside warehouse. It was a risky move, but Hale knew this was their chance to strike at the heart of the syndicate. Undercover officers infiltrated the area, while Hale and crews monitored communications from a nearby van. As night fell, tension crackled in the air. Officers positioned themselves strategically, waiting for the signal. Inside the warehouse, Morales and the Broker stood near a table covered in maps and documents, oblivious to the trap closing in around them. Suddenly, flashbangs exploded, flooding the room with blinding light and deafening noise. Backup teams stormed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. In the ensuing chaos, Morales pulled a gun, firing wildly before collapsing to the ground, fatally wounded. The Broker tried to flee but was quickly apprehended. When Hale entered the warehouse, his eyes locked onto Morales's lifeless body. For a moment he felt nothing, not triumph, not relief, just a hollow emptiness. This was the cost of justice, he realized. Lives destroyed, families torn apart, all because of greed and power. As officers secured the scene, Hale turned away, his jaw clenched tightly. The fight wasn't over, but tonight they had struck a critical blow. Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water. Hale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything he'd endured and everything still ahead. Justice might come at a price, but he was ready to pay it. The aftermath of the dockside raid brought a mix of closure and lingering unease. Victor Kane's empire, Once a towering force of fear and corruption had been dealt a devastating blow. With his top lieutenant Morales dead and the broker arrested, the syndicate's grip on the city began to crumble. Informants came forward eager to cut deals in exchange for leniency. Evidence poured in, linking Kane to countless crimes, including Hale's abduction. For Detective Marcus Hale, it was vindication after weeks of pain and uncertainty. But, as much as he wanted to celebrate, he couldn't shake the heaviness that settled over him. The trial against Kane became a media sensation, with headlines splashed across every newspaper in the city. Testimonies from witnesses, along with the evidence recovered during the raids, painted a damning picture of a man who ruled through intimidation and violence. Even from prison, Kane had orchestrated horrors that reached far beyond bars. When the verdict came, guilty on all charges, the courtroom erupted into applause. Hale sat quietly in the back row, his expression unreadable. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like enough. No sentence could undo the scars left behind. Back at the precinct, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after such an ordeal. The discovery of Detective Ryan Greer as the mole sent shockwaves through the department. Officers attended mandatory ethics training sessions, and trust had to be rebuilt piece by piece. Captain Laura Simmons worked tirelessly to restore morale, reminding everyone why they had chosen this line of work: to protect and serve. Still, the betrayal lingered like a shadow, a reminder that evil could take root even in familiar places. For Hale, returning to duty wasn't easy. His body healed, but his mind carried wounds that wouldn't fade overnight. He often found himself staring out the window of his apartment late at night, replaying moments from his captivity. The darkness of the coffin, the suffocating silence, it haunted him in ways he couldn't fully explain. But instead of letting it consume him, he channeled those feelings into purpose. Each day, he reminded himself that survival wasn't just about living. It was about rising above what tried to break you. Elena Cruz became his anchor during this time. She checked in regularly, not just as a colleague but as a friend. "You've been through hell," she told him one evening over coffee. "No, one expects you to bounce back overnight. Take it slow, Marcus." Her words were a lifeline, grounding him when the weight of everything threatened to pull him under. Together, they reviewed cold cases, finding solace in solving puzzles and bringing answers to families who had waited too long for closure. As months passed, Hale began to find balance again. He threw himself into mentoring younger detectives, sharing lessons learned from years on the job, and from his own harrowing experience. "Evil thrives where good people stay silent," he would say during training sessions. "Don't ever let fear stop you from doing what's right." His words resonated deeply, inspiring a new generation of officers determined to make a difference. Yet, despite the progress, Hale knew the fight was never truly over. Crime evolved, taking new shapes and forms, always lurking in the corners of society. But so did justice, and as long as there were people willing to stand against wrongdoing, hope remained alive. One crisp morning, Hale stood outside the precinct, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. He felt a quiet sense of peace, not because everything was perfect, but because he had faced the worst and emerged stronger. The scars would always be there, reminders of battles fought and won. But they were also proof of resilience, of light breaking through even the darkest nights. Justice wasn't just a word or a concept, it was a choice, made every single day. And for Detective Marcus Hale, it was a choice he would continue to make, no matter how hard the road ahead might be.